said $900 and something, I thought for a moment that was the price of his New York hotel room. I thought, no, that can't be true. It'll be in the thousands. But Mr. Speaker, he's spreading disinformation again. He promised he was going to censor misinformation. Why doesn't he censor himself? Because look at the information coming from the parliamentary budget officer he appointed, which demonstrates that the average Canadian will spend at least $1,500 more in taxes than they get back in rebates. The Liberals call this report a prop. It's from the parliamentary budget officer, the one they appointed. They're called facts. Will he finally listen to them?
Today, if you're reading from something like I'm reading right now, it's something. It's a resource. It's a source. If I hold it up like this, it's a prop, and nobody wants to hold up a prop. The right honourable
tell you he wasn't reading from the PBO report because the PBO report has actually decried the fact that it is being misinterpreted deliberately, indeed, by the Conservatives. The reality is, and the report is very clear, 8 out of 10 families in jurisdictions where the price on pollution applies do better with this price on pollution. But what the Leader of the Opposition doesn't want to talk about is the fact that having no plan, as he doesn't, to fight climate change is not going to create jobs for Canadians, not create growth for the economy, and not leave Canadians better off in the coming years.
He wants to censor the internet, Mr. Speaker. He doesn't want Canadians to go and find out which of us is telling the truth. It would be very easy for them. I encourage them to Google a distributional analysis of the federal fuel charge on the 2030 emissions reduction plan. Page 3. If you're out there watching, Google it now. You will see the Prime Minister is deliberately misinforming the House of Commons by stating that Canadians will be better off when clearly the average household will pay more than $1,500 more in taxes than they get back. Would the Prime Minister like me to have one of the pages send this document over so that he can read it?
The government would still choose, the Conservative opposition still chooses
He can't even
we take direction from their whip. Just look at her or him. I mean, and just listen.
Tonight's Parliament exchange didn't feel like a normal political debate. It felt like two completely different versions of reality crashing into each other in real time, with neither side willing to step back even an inch. It started with a familiar trigger: numbers, taxes, reports, carbon pricing, the kind of technical language that usually stays buried in policy papers. But the moment Pierre Poilievre told Canadians to just Google it, the tone of the entire chamber shifted. That line wasn't just a suggestion, it was a challenge, a direct invitation for the public to step outside Parliament and decide for themselves who was telling the truth. Justin Trudeau immediately pushed back, framing that move as irresponsible and misleading. He accused Poilievre of misrepresenting a parliamentary budget officer report, a report the government itself had commissioned. That detail mattered because it turned the argument into something sharper than usual politics. If even official government data can't be agreed upon, then what counts as truth anymore? But Poilievre didn't retreat. He leaned harder into the claim that Canadians are paying more under the current carbon pricing system than they are getting back in rebates. And instead of staying inside procedural language, he pushed the argument outward toward ordinary citizens watching at home. The message was simple: don't trust interpretations, check it yourself. That's where the clash became more than just policy disagreement. It became a fight over authority. Trudeau's response wasn't soft either. He accused the opposition of deliberately misreading the data and ignoring broader economic context, investment, climate policy, and long-term growth. He positioned the government's approach as part of a global shift, pointing to companies investing in Canada because of its environmental direction. In his framing, the opposition wasn't just wrong, it was obstructing progress. But Poilievre's framing was emotionally sharper. He kept returning to one central idea: cost. For him, this wasn't about abstract economic theory, it was about household budgets, fuel prices, and working families feeling squeezed. Every time Trudeau talked about future benefits or international investment, Poilievre pulled it back to immediate financial pain. And that's what made the exchange feel so intense. Both sides were talking past each other in completely different time horizons. One side was defending long-term structural strategy, the other was hammering short-term lived experience. As the exchange escalated, the rhetoric hardened. Accusations of misinformation started flying. Claims of misinterpretation and deliberate confusion entered the conversation. At that point, it stopped being about one report and started becoming about credibility itself. Who do Canadians trust when institutions disagree? That question hung over the entire chamber, even when it wasn't being directly said. Trudeau's defense leaned heavily on the idea that climate policy and economic growth are not opposing forces, but linked systems. He pointed to investments, jobs, and industrial development as evidence that the strategy is working. The message was clear. Abandoning climate policy would not remove costs. It would remove future opportunity. Poilievre, on the other hand, rejected that framing entirely. He argued that no matter how it is packaged, the reality for many Canadians is higher costs without visible relief. He highlighted past government spending projects and rising prices as proof that promises are not translating into results. What made the moment particularly striking wasn't just disagreement, it was certainty. Neither side spoke like they were guessing. Both spoke like they already had the verdict, and the other side was simply refusing to accept it. By the final moments, the exchange had moved far beyond its original topic. It was no longer just about carbon pricing or tax distribution. It had become a broader confrontation about governance itself, whether current policy decisions are stabilizing the country or pushing it further away from affordability and trust. And underneath all of it was a quieter, more uncomfortable reality. The public isn't just watching a debate anymore, they're being asked to choose which version of reality they believe more. That's why this moment stands out. Not because it was loud or chaotic or even particularly new in content, but because of how clearly it revealed the widening gap in political storytelling. One side is selling structure and long-term transformation. The other is selling immediacy and cost pressure. And in between those two narratives, Canadians are left doing something politicians now openly encourage, checking, searching, and deciding for themselves. In the end, nothing was resolved in that chamber. No agreement was reached. No middle ground was found. What remained instead was sharper division, louder messaging, and a clear reminder that modern political battles are no longer just fought in Parliament. They are fought in search bars, comment sections, and public perception. And that might be the most important takeaway of all. The argument didn't end when the speaker moved on. It continued outside the chamber, where the real verdict always lands.